starting with this Ole Miss Oklahoma game, you're going with the under. It's one of the biggest games of the week, no?
By far, a huge game for both of these teams. A second loss for both could be a nail in the coffin type of loss in terms of a college football playoff or SEC championship bid. Now, a 10-2 team could still get to the SEC title and certainly a college football playoff berth, but puts themselves behind the sticks here, so to say, with some unbeaten teams in SEC play like Texas A&M and Alabama. So it is a monumental game. And we're in a time in college football area where I think we need to readjust what we expect out of teams or readjust how we view teams in terms of being good at football or not. We are playing in the era of mega conferences. We are playing in the era of incredible schedule imbalance. The days of going 11-1 or cakewalking to 12-0 being the only recipe that you could have of reaching the 4-team college football playoff or being in the BCS national championship game, or well before that, having magazine writers deem you the national champion around the country in college football. All of that needs to be readjusted and changed, which leads us to this game for two teams that have taken only one loss. Ole Miss last week, their first loss of the year in Athens in a highly competitive game between the Hedges against Georgia, and Oklahoma in the rivalry game at the Cotton Bowl against Texas. Both of these teams are really good. But the reason I am betting on the under of 53.5 is one, the public loves the over. And when you think about the Rebs, how could you not? But one thing I am in love with for this OU team is its defense and its physicality up front. They are the best team at getting after the quarterback in the country this year in college football. The dog pound is what they call themselves on the D-line in Norman. They have lived up to that billing. They stifled the rushing attack of South Carolina, and even in the loss to Texas, held the Longhorns to only 302 total yards, despite the offense, with John Mateer probably playing with a half manageable thumb, being a little bit behind the 8 ball in that game in the Cotton Bowl. I still think Oklahoma is a really good team, and the reason I have had confidence in the Sooners being a CFB team, despite its grueling schedule, was more on the defense than it was the marriage of John Mateer and his offensive coordinator in Ben Arbuckle when they arrived in Norman together. So I think some of the areas where Ole Miss has been explosive, Oklahoma can contain. The Rebs not great in terms of stopping the run. I think Oklahoma will focus on that with John Mateer clearly not at 100%. I love the under in this game because I think Oklahoma ultimately wins. Line's starting to get away. If you haven't bet OU, where it opened early this week at 3.5. I think the Sooners win, and I think the Sooners win because of a dominant defense.
Craig says, I like Oklahoma because they're at home and Ole Miss will be still recovering from their loss to Georgia. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's tough, right, to lose on the road and then play a second consecutive road game against the top 15 team. Ultimately, that's the situation that every SEC team is going to find themselves in all around the country in certain conferences. You are going to have difficult stretches where you just can't take any time off. It's a very different landscape than what we knew when there was conferences with divisions and you knew the same teams that you were going to play each and every season.
Michigan and Michigan State, they pretty much play every season. Good rivalry.
Yeah.
The over there is that, I mean, why?
It is the over because when you look at these two teams, you are probably not thinking of betting the over. Michigan State, the worst scoring defense in the Big Ten, and they have been absolutely thrashed in their 4 Big Ten games, allowing about 416 yards of total offense to the opposition. And one of the areas the Spartans really struggle with defensively is defending the run and stopping all of that. That is where Michigan is at their best. Justice Haynes missed last week. Jordan Marshall filled in brilliantly to the tune of 133 yards and a touchdown against Washington, and Haynes is back at practice, expected or at least hopeful that he will play in the rivalry game in East Lansing on Saturday night. But this is it for Michigan State. If it is a poor result out there on the field in East Lansing, inside Spartan Stadium against their bitter rival, in this game with a 14.5-point spread in favor of the Maize and Blue is not competitive, I think that will do it for Jonathan Smith. I think even in his second year with a large buyout, we could see him fired on Sunday afternoon, unless Michigan State at least gives you something to buy stock into here in this second year. So I think Michigan State, whose offense looked a lot better last week early against Indiana, who's the second best scoring defense in the Big Ten. If MSU can start to replicate that, especially through the air with Aiden Childs, they're going to put up points. I think Michigan will have no issue moving the football and scoring as well. I'm expecting this game to be more high scoring than the 47.5 for the over-under would indicate.
Speaking of being fired, there's obviously all those rumors swirling around Coach Belichick, and if he's going to make it another season at North Carolina, They're hosting Virginia, a ranked opponent. How do you see this one panning out?
I thought North Carolina looked really good last Friday night in Berkeley. It was the first time as an underdog that they had covered so far this year. It was the first time against any power conference competition, their fourth game of it. They didn't lose by 25 points or allow at least 34 points to the opposition. So there are some building blocks, I guess you could say, for UNC. That is one of the rarities in college football. North Carolina, a team that had 2 byes early by the time we've already reached week number 8, now into week number 9. The key for me for UNC against Virginia, who's been a team that has been rather lucky, per se, in terms of having some good bounces go their way and finding some late game theatrics to win. I think UNC can stay within the number in Chapel Hill. Anything beyond that, like an outright victory for Bill Belichick's first against a Power 4 foe or in the ACC, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what the experiment is going to be in Chapel Hill when the year comes to a close for Belichick and company. I don't necessarily know what UNC is willing to fork up to kind of find his way out. But it seems like for both parties, things are not working unless we take Bill Belichick at his word, who following the bye week and ahead of the game against Cal last week said that everybody was confident the process is working in the same way. I am not, but they did cover and look very competitive against the Golden Bears. If they can stack that up a few times here down the stretch in ACC play, maybe Belichick sees year 2 in Chapel Hill.
You know what's funny about the Belichick scenario? I feel like I haven't heard many people talk about this angle. It's all about money in college football, especially right now with bringing donors in, bringing in money, NIL. Do you know how many old men and old money is out there in the North Carolina state that wants nothing more than to just shake Bill Belichick's hand and might give you a pretty penny for it? That's why he's there.
Yeah.
He's a great coach, don't get me wrong, but he's still there because I am sure they brought in so much money for Bill Belichick. It's going to be hard to let that go.
Yeah, I would assume so, but I also know that very rich people want to see a return on their investment and not be made fun of and be the mockery story of college football during the 2025 season. So with all of the investment, and let's be honest, to your point, Ariel, it has not been financial resources that the reason North Carolina is being held back this year. They forked up the big cash to bring in Belichick to pay him $10 million per year. We just saw it today that the GM's salary report, the highest paid general manager in college football, is Michael Lombardi at $1.5 million per season for UNC. And it has not worked, right? We have not seen that return in anything slightly competitively successful. Could that be all the resources and funding they had? They invested in the wrong sorts of players in the transfer portal. And because there was that learning curve there behind the 8 ball, I am sure. But for whatever reason, at a certain point, the money up front is great, but they're going to want to make sure they see some sort of return.
Uncle Ted said SMU is going to smoke Wake Forest.
Okay. Yeah, Uncle Ted, if you want to focus on that one, that's a good spot. SMU's look really good since not looking very good early in the year. The loss to Baylor in double overtime. They were losing to Missouri State by double digits, I think, in week 3 or week 4. Wake Forest is a work in progress. They had a great game with Robbie Ashford in what should have probably been the upset of the Yellow Jackets of Georgia Tech in Winston-Salem. I still think Jake Dickert, the head coach for Wake, is going to need to put some things in place to kind of find a stable foundation for what this Wake Forest football team can be. But I like where SMU is trending, and they are certainly in play for an ACC championship, one of the few undefeated teams in the conference alongside Georgia Tech now and Virginia. So both teams, all 3 of those teams, SMU's got a great shot of being back in the ACC title game for a second straight year. And I would just say this, SMU undefeated in regular season play as an ACC member. They were also unbeaten in their final season in 2023 in the American. Under Rhett Lashley in the last 2.5 years, the Stangs have not lost a regular season conference game. It's pretty incredible seeing the leap they have made in the investment in that program in Dallas.
One place that I need to go in my life, and everyone's telling me I need to do this, I need to experience this, it's Baton Rouge under the lights. LSU under the lights this weekend. 20th ranked Tigers going up against the 3rd ranked Texas A&M Aggies. And A&M's laying 2.5 on the road under the lights at LSU. Where do you lean there?
Yeah, it is one of those great atmospheres in all of college football. Death Valley Tiger Stadium at night. And it has the results to back it up. Since the turn of the millennium, in 2000. LSU was 116-16 straight up in night games at Tiger Stadium. Under Brian Kelly, despite some of the struggles the last few years since the beginning of 2022, the Bayou Bengals are 20-1 straight up in home night games inside Tiger Stadium. But in those glorious records, a couple of things that could expose themselves here against A&M do start to arise. I said 116-16 since 2000. Half of those 16 losses, so 8, have come against AP top 10 teams. A&M is number 3 in the country, 20-1 under Brian Kelly. Well, LSU is an underdog at home, getting 2.5 points in a night home game. The last time they were a home dog at night was last season against Alabama when they got routed 42-13, the lone night home game loss in the BK era. What concerns me for LSU, of course, is the offense. Even last week in Nashville, putting up 24 points. That was their season high in 5 games against power conference competition. They are averaging 20 points per game against P4 foes. In the first 3 years of the Brian Kelly experiment in Baton Rouge, LSU has never averaged fewer than 30 points per game or 430 yards of total offense, and they have been stagnant and stale on that side. A&M's had some defensive issues in replacing a ton of NFL talent from last year's team, but offensively, the Aggies can get it done as well. Now, I don't have enough confidence, Ariel, to bet this myself, but if you were asking me for a winner of this game, I would take the home dog under the lights in Death Valley, because I think this is the time that LSU at least starts to right the ship and find something offensively against A&M.